I was fighting for air when my sister leaned in, yanked the oxygen tube from my face, and whispered loud enough for the entire room, "Stop faking it. You just want pity." No hesitation, no remorse. My parents stood at the foot of the bed, arms folded, eyes flat, saying nothing as my lungs collapsed in on themselves. But the mistake they all made was assuming I was alone. They didn't see Dr. Cole standing behind them, watching everything. And 2 weeks later, at Grandpa's will reading, he would speak 6 words that ended their entire story. Before I continue, where are you listening from? Tell me, so I know someone out there understands what it feels like to face family alone. My name is Evelyn Hart, and for most of my life, I played the role everyone expected of me. The strong one, the steady one, the daughter who never needed anything. People think that kind of strength is admirable. They don't realize it's usually just loneliness dressed up to look respectable. Growing up, my family didn't dislike me. They just didn't see me. Not really. Not the way they saw Marissa. She arrived 4 years after me like some glittering miracle, the child my mother had always dreamed of. Beautiful, delicate, dramatic in a way that drew attention like a magnet. I remember being 8 years old, setting the dinner table while Mom bent down in a cloud of perfume and told Marissa she had a special spark. I spent years trying to understand why I never had one. The truth is, I learned early that silence kept the peace. When Marissa cried, I stepped aside. When she wanted something, my parents rearranged their lives. When I needed help, the answer was always the same. "You're strong, Evelyn. You'll figure it out." And I did because I had no other choice. The only person who ever interrupted that narrative was my grandfather, Arthur Hale. He was the kind of man who noticed the smallest things, a fraying sweater cuff, a long exhale the way a child held herself when she was trying not to cry. When I was 12, my family forgot my birthday because Marissa had a recital downtown. I sat behind his old tool shed, staring at the dirt, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. He found me, there knelt down with those rough hands and said quietly, "You are a gem, hidden in darkness. One day the light will find you." I didn't understand what he meant then, but I held on to his words like a lifeline. As I got older, work became my refuge. I built a career in healthcare operations, learned discipline out of necessity, my lungs demanded it, and kept my distance from the chaos of my family. I lived in a small condo in Denver, surrounded by quiet and clean air purifiers, telling myself space was enough. Then Grandpa died, and somehow no one thought to tell me he'd been declining. They gave me the news after he was already gone, as if my grief would be tidier that way. I should have known that was the beginning of everything unraveling. The day of Grandpa's funeral felt like stepping into a play where everyone else had memorized their lines, except me. The church in Denver smelled faintly of polished wood and lilies, and every pew was filled with relatives, dabbing at their eyes as if grief were a performance they'd rehearsed. I stood near the back, hands clasped, lungs tight from the altitude, and the emotion I wasn't allowed to show. Marissa, of course, sat in the very front, draped in a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her shoulders shook dramatically, earning pats and sympathetic whispers from every aunt within reach. My mother leaned over and announced proudly, "Marissa was such a comfort to your grandfather in his final days." She said it loudly enough for half the row to hear. What she didn't say, what they all refused to say, was that no one had told me he was fading until it was already too late. When the service ended, people filed out into the parking lot holding paper cups of weak coffee and talking about Grandpa's generosity. I slipped toward the coat room, needing a moment to breathe. Instead, I got Marissa. She cornered me between 2 racks of black wool, her face dry despite the theatrics she'd just displayed. "You should prepare yourself," she said, her voice low, almost gleeful. "Grandpa left most things to me, the house, the investments, all of it." She smiled like she was sharing good news. Some of us were actually there for him. The words hit harder than I expected. I had no claim on Grandpa's money, I never wanted any. But the cruelty of her implication still sliced deep. I didn't respond. Silence had always been my armor, even when it shouldn't have been. By the time I got home that night, my chest felt tight. I chalked it up to stress, cold weather exhaustion. But at 2 a.m, I woke gasping for breath, lungs refusing to expand, the familiar terror of my condition closing in like a fist. I called an ambulance, and everything blurred into flashing lights and the rhythmic clatter of wheels down a hospital hallway. When my parents arrived the next morning, I expected worry. What I got was irritation. "Evelyn," my mother sighed, arms folded, "you always find a way to complicate things. We have the will reading this week. Your father has paperwork." Marissa leaned against the wall, examining her manicure. "She's probably exaggerating. She always wants attention." I opened my mouth to defend myself, but the words never reached them. They had already turned away, and that was the moment something inside me shifted. When they left the room, it felt as if the air went with them. The hum of the ventilator was steady, reassuring, and then without warning, it wasn't. Marissa stepped closer to my bed, her smile thin and sharp, the kind she wore when she thought no one was watching. "You really don't know when to quit," she murmured. Then she reached down, fingers closing around the tubing beneath my nose. Before I could react, she yanked. White-hot panic exploded through my chest. My vision fractured. I clawed at the empty air, trying to pull oxygen into lungs that refused to open. The world narrowed to the sound of my own desperate choking and the chilling calm on Marissa's face. "Stop faking it," she said softly, almost bored. "You just want pity." I tried to speak, to scream, to do anything, but my body wasn't listening. I saw the doorframe blur, and for a moment I thought I was hallucinating. A dark figure stood there still as stone. Dr. Adrian Cole. His voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Step away from her." Marissa jolted, startled, but Dr. Cole was already moving. He reattached the oxygen, adjusted the flow, checked my vitals with precise, controlled hands. When my lungs finally loosened and the world came back into focus, he turned not to me, but to her. "What you did was dangerous," he said, quiet but freezing. And I saw all of it. Marissa stammered something about a loose tube, but he didn't respond. He simply pointed toward the hallway. She fled. Later that afternoon, after my breathing stabilized, Nurse Elena Ruiz stepped in for her shift. She checked my monitors, then closed the door behind her with a decisive click. "I heard what happened," she said, "and there's something else you should know." She told me about the night my grandfather died, the night Marissa insisted on being alone with him, how the monitors went wild 30 minutes later, how she sat by the window strangely calm, how the breathing tube had been found slightly displaced. "I'm not saying I know what happened," Elena said, "but I know what I saw." A cold resolve settled over me, sharper than fear. Then Dr. Cole returned. He pulled a chair to my bedside, exhaustion in the set of his shoulders. "Your grandfather trusted me," he said. "He asked me to look out for you if you ever ended up here. And before he died, he left instructions, documents you're meant to receive." The pieces were shifting, aligning. For the first time in my life, I wasn't alone. And the truth, every buried, suffocating part of it, was finally rising to the surface. The morning of the will reading arrived colder than it should have been. Denver's sky had that sharp metallic gray that always comes before snow, and as I walked toward the law office downtown, every breath burned through my lungs like winter glass. But it wasn't fear making me tense. It was clarity, a kind I had never felt before. I wasn't walking in alone. Dr. Cole met me at the entrance, coat buttoned, expression unreadable but steady. Nurse Elena Ruiz joined us a moment later, her presence small but solid, anchored by the kind of quiet conviction that can't be shaken once it decides to stand. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded, though ready wasn't the word. I wasn't prepared for this. No one could be, but I was done being silent. Inside the waiting room buzzed with low whispers. My parents sat together, stiff-backed, attempting dignity. My mother clutched her purse like a shield. My father's knee bounced beneath the table, a tell he'd had since I was little. And then there was Marissa. She wore a white sweater dress, impossibly soft-looking, the kind of fabric that telegraphed innocence and expense. Her hair was curled perfectly, her makeup clean and dewy, an angelic veneer that would have fooled anyone who hadn't watched her rip the oxygen from her sister's face. When she saw me enter with Dr. Cole and Elena walking at my sides, something flickered in her expression. A tiny involuntary twitch. Not fear, yet more like confusion mixed with irritation. as if I'd broken some unspoken rule by refusing to show up alone and apologetic. The door opened again, and attorney Gregory Miles called us into the conference room. It was a glass-walled space overlooking downtown, the kind of place where silence carries weight. A polished wood table stretched across the room, and folders sat neatly arranged in front of each chair. We took our seats. My parents avoided my eyes. Marissa made a show of smoothing her skirt. Gregory cleared his throat. "Your grandfather, Arthur Hale, left very precise instructions," he began. "This reading is to be conducted with all immediate family present, as well as witnesses he named specifically." His gaze flicked to Dr. Cole and Elena. Marissa stiffened. "We'll begin with the estate distribution." Paper rustled. Gregory lifted the first document. "The primary residence in Boulder, appraised at approximately $800,000, will be divided equally between Lorraine Hart, William Hart, and Evelyn Hart." My mother blinked. My father's head jerked up. Marissa shot to her feet. "That's not right," she snapped. "Grandpa told me the house was mine. He said I would be taken care of." Gregory didn't flinch. "Sit down, Miss Hart. There is more." She sank back into her chair, knuckles white against the table's edge. "The remaining investment accounts," he continued, "are to be allocated based on separate instructions provided by Mr. Hale." He closed the folder. "Before we proceed, we need testimony." The room shifted. Air thickened. Dr. Adrian Cole Gregory said Mr. Hale named you as a crucial witness. Dr. Cole stood slowly, his posture straight, voice level and clear. "I cared for Arthur Hale for 5 years. In that time, he confided in me significant concerns about his family dynamics, particularly regarding Evelyn, who he believed had been neglected and mistreated." He looked straight at my parents as he spoke. "Mr. Hale requested that if Evelyn ever arrived at this hospital, I was to ensure she was not alone." My mother opened her mouth to object, but he continued. 3 days ago, I walked into her ICU room and witnessed her sister Marissa Hart deliberately removing her oxygen tube, causing airway compromise and acute respiratory distress." The words hung in the air like a dropped chandelier. My mother gasped. My father's knee stopped bouncing. Marissa's lips parted in shock. "That's a lie," she burst out. "She was exaggerating. She always exaggerates." Elena rose before Gregory could call her. "I was there," she said quietly. "I saw you pull the tube, and I saw you stand there while your sister choked." Marissa let out a strangled sound, a mixture of disbelief and panic. "This is insane. They're making things up. Why would I hurt my own sister? This is some attack." Gregory lifted a hand for silence. Then he reached for a separate envelope. "Your grandfather anticipated denial. He left this as well." He handed the envelope to Dr. Cole, who stepped closer to Marissa. His shadow fell across her as he set a hand on her trembling shoulder. The room froze. He looked her directly in the eyes and spoke the 6 words Grandpa had left for her. "I saw you." And he knew. The effect was instant. Marissa's face drained of color, eyes blown wide with something raw fear, recognition, guilt, maybe all 3. Her breath hitched. Her composure cracked like thin ice. What does that mean?" she whispered. Gregory answered. "It means your grandfather changed his will after learning about your financial misconduct and your treatment of your sister. He left documented correspondence notes and accounts of the distress you caused him. He instructed me to remove you from inheriting any major assets." He opened the last envelope. "Furthermore, Mr. Hale created a separate bequest to Evelyn." My heart hammered. I didn't want money. I'd never wanted anything from them except respect. But hearing my name spoken with intention, spoken by someone who had seen me, made something inside me steadier. Gregory read to my granddaughter, Evelyn, who lived her life in shadows not of her making. I leave the mountain retreat in Boulder and a healthcare trust ensuring she never worries about treatment. I saw your strength. I saw your kindness, and I was always proud. My throat tightened, not from grief this time, but from recognition. Someone had finally chosen me. Across the table, Marissa broke. She shoved her chair back and dropped to her knees beside me, grabbing my hands. Her voice trembled with desperation. "Evelyn, Please, please, don't let them do this. I didn't mean it. I was stressed. I was scared. You know how things get. We're sisters, blood is blood. You can't just abandon me. I pulled my hands back gently. All my life, I had been the one who bent, the one who absorbed the hit, the one who stayed quiet so the family stayed peaceful. But peace built on someone's silence isn't peace. It's bondage. Marissa, I said softly, I'm not suing you. I'm not pressing charges. I'm not taking this to court. Relief burst across her face. But then I finished. But from today forward, you are not my family. Her smile collapsed. You don't mean that. I do. I'm done carrying the weight of your choices. I'm done pretending your cruelty is just insecurity. You will deal with your debts. You will deal with your reputation, and you will deal with the truth of what you did. My mother finally found her voice. Evelyn, she whispered, this is all so much. We didn't know. You did, I said quietly. Every time she mocked me and you laughed. Every time you praised her for breathing and ignored my achievements. Every time I asked for help and you said I was strong enough. You knew. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. My father's eyes glistened. Can you ever forgive us? I don't know, I said. But forgiveness without change is just another performance. If you want a relationship with me, you will have to earn it. No one spoke after that. Not a word. When we left the law office, snow had finally begun to fall, soft, slow flakes that melted the moment they touched the ground. Dr. Cole walked beside me, Elena just behind. For the first time in my life, the air felt clean. I moved into the mountain retreat 3 weeks after the will reading. The house sat on a quiet hillside in Boulder, tucked between tall pines that swayed like they were breathing with me. The first morning I woke there, sunlight spilled across the hardwood floors, and for the first time in years, my lungs expanded without effort. No alarms, no tension, just air. I unpacked slowly, room by room. Grandpa's books went into the study exactly as he'd kept them, alphabetized, annotated, some pages softened by time. Running my fingers across his handwriting felt like touching a memory that had finally learned to speak. I didn't block my parents' numbers. I didn't invite them either. Boundaries, I learned, weren't walls, they were doors I controlled. A week later, my father sent a message saying they were working on things. I didn't respond, but I didn't delete it. On Saturdays, I met Dr. Cole at a small cafe overlooking the ridge. He told me stories Grandpa had shared during appointments, questions about my work, pride he never voiced to the family, worries he buried because no one listened. Each story stitched something inside me back together. One evening, Nurse Elena called. A journalist from a national women's magazine wanted to talk. She'd heard about my experience at the hospital, not for scandal, but for a story on resilience and invisible daughters. For a moment, I hesitated. Then I said yes. Healing, I realized, wasn't about forgetting what happened. It was about stepping into a life where I no longer needed permission to breathe. In the quiet of that mountain house, I finally understood what Grandpa meant when he said the light would find me. It wasn't about fortune or revenge. It was about finally seeing my own worth after a lifetime of being overlooked. And if you've ever felt like the invisible one in your family, I want you to hear this clearly. You deserved better too. If my story resonates, share where you're listening from. Tell me your truth in the comments and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. You're not alone.